Hey love, welcome back. This is My Married Boss Part 2. If you haven't listened to Part 1, go start from there. Now where did we stop? Let's continue. The day after Genevieve Sterling said the word wife, I started noticing how careful Serafina was with time. Not the usual corporate careful, a different kind, the kind of careful you become when your life is split into compartments and you can't afford for any of them to leak. Serafina arrived that morning in black, as always, the private elevator delivering her like a verdict. She walked past my desk without slowing, without looking at me, as if eye contact was a privilege she hadn't scheduled. I stood anyway. "Good morning, Miss Sterling. Ms. Cohen," she replied, already reaching for her office doors. "My schedule in 10. "Yes, Miss Sterling." Her doors slid shut, and I sat down with the strange ache of being close enough to her to know her routine, and far enough that I still felt like a stranger. 10 minutes later, I brought her tablet in. She accepted it without a word, scanned, adjusted, returned it. Then, still not looking at me, she said, "If Genevieve calls, take the message. Don't transfer it." My fingers tightened around the edge of the tablet. Of course, that was it. No explanation, no emotion, nothing that sounded like a woman in the middle of a divorce. Just instructions. I walked back out and closed the doors softly behind me, my mind doing what it always did around Serafina, filling silence with meaning. At 11:17, the private line rang. I answered on the second ring. Serafina Sterling's office. A pause, a breath. Then Genevieve's voice. Smooth, composed, the kind of calm that could cut glass. "Leah Cohen," she said, like she'd read my name somewhere official. "Put my wife on." My spine straightened. "Ms. Sterling is unavailable, ma'am. May I take a message?" Genevieve didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She simply let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. "You're very good," she said quietly. "I can see why she keeps you close." My throat tightened. I kept my tone professional. "What message would you like me to pass along?" Another pause. Then, softly, "Tell her I'll be in town this evening. Tell her I'm still waiting." "Understood," I said. "And Leah?" "Yes, ma'am." Genevieve's voice lowered. Not intimate, territorial. "When she comes back from whatever she's doing with Jade, she'll call me." The line went dead. I set the receiver down slowly, staring at it as if it had weight. It wasn't a threat. It didn't need to be. It was ownership spoken calmly. I typed the message exactly the way Serafina preferred. Brief, factual, stripped of anything that might resemble drama. Genevieve Sterling called. Requested a return call. Said she'll be in town this evening. I sent it to Serafina's private device. No response came back. Of course it didn't. By early afternoon, I had a file Serafina requested. One of those documents she needed before a call, the kind that couldn't have mistakes, because mistakes became leverage in rooms full of sharks. I checked it twice, then once more. I walked to her office. Her assistant's instincts picked up something before my ears did. A faint murmur behind the frosted glass. Someone else was in there. I should have turned around, left the file at the edge, and waited. That was the safest choice. But Serafina had asked for it, and Serafina did not enjoy waiting for what she'd requested. I lifted my hand and knocked once. "Enter." Serafina's voice came, cool and immediate. I stepped inside. Jade Maxwell was there, not standing near Serafina like a visitor would. Seated, comfortable, as if Serafina's office was an extension of her own life. She looked up at me with that slow, appreciative interest that didn't pretend to be accidental. Serafina didn't look at me at all. I crossed to the desk and set the file down precisely at the edge of her right hand. "The file you requested, Miss Sterling," I said. "Thank you, Miss Cohen," she replied, eyes on her screen. No glance, no shift. I turned to leave, and as I reached the doors, Jade's voice floated after me, light as perfume. "Leah, just my name. Soft. Testing how it felt in the room." I didn't turn back. I didn't pause. I walked out like I hadn't heard it. The doors slid shut behind me. I exhaled only when I was outside again, as if I'd been holding my breath the entire time. I returned to my desk and tried to re-anchor myself in work, but my pulse wouldn't settle, because Jade had looked at me like she was already choosing something, and Serafina had refused to look at me like she was trying very hard not to. 10 minutes later, I stood to retrieve a printout from the secured printer near Serafina's door. As I passed, I heard voices again. Low, close. I wasn't trying to listen. but the apex floor is quiet in a way that makes whispers feel loud. Jade spoke first, amused. "So," she said, "do I have your blessing to take her to dinner?" My steps stopped. "Inside," Serafina answered immediately. Sharp, clean. "No." Jade's laugh was soft. "That was fast." "Ask someone else out," Serafina said. Clipped. "Leave the girl alone." A pause, then Jade's voice, now less amused and more intrigued. "That's new," she said. "You're acting like you care." Serafina's response came calm, controlled. "She's my PA. And that should stop me," Jade asked, almost gently, like she was genuinely curious. "Since when has that ever stopped you from letting me do what I want?" A silence, measured. Then Serafina said quietly, "Maybe it does this time." Jade didn't laugh. She exhaled, surprised, because Serafina Sterling didn't usually get possessive. Serafina Sterling didn't usually notice. Jade spoke again, softer. "She's your type," Serafina replied like she was stating a fact to end a discussion. "I'm married." 2 words, a wall. Jade's voice turned low, triumphant in its calm. "Wait," she said. "You like her?" Serafina answered too quickly. "I don't." Jade didn't press loudly. She didn't need to. "You just told me no, Sarah," she said, almost tender. "You never tell me no." For a moment, there was nothing but quiet. Then Serafina's voice returned. Smooth, executive, a pivot so clean it almost hurt. "What time is your flight?" she asked. Jade chuckled softly, satisfied. "There you go. Back to control." "I have calls," Serafina said, cool. "We're done with this conversation." And just like that, it ended. I stood in the corridor with a printout in my hand, my body perfectly still. "You like her." The words weren't meant for me, but they slid under my skin anyway, sweet and poisonous. Serafina Sterling liked me, and the woman who never made anything easy, who treated attraction like weakness, was going to make me pay for it in silence. I walked back to my desk, sat down, and stared at my screen. Nothing on it made sense anymore, because my mind had latched onto one unbearable possibility. If Serafina liked me, then every cold glance, every extra task, every deliberate distance wasn't disinterest, it was restraint. By Wednesday, I'd learned the difference between 2 kinds of silence. The first kind is peaceful, the kind that lets you breathe. The second kind is Serafina Sterling's silence, the kind that makes you feel like you're standing too close to something expensive and breakable. After what I overheard yesterday, I should have been careful. I should have been numb. Instead, I walked into the apex floor with my thoughts loud and unruly, trying to behave like I hadn't heard Jade ask for my boss's blessing to take me to dinner, and heard Serafina say no. Trying to behave like I hadn't heard Jade say the words that ruined me. "You like her." Serafina came in as usual. Black suit, clean scent, controlled steps. She didn't look at me. Not when I greeted her. Not when I stood. Not when I handed her the tablet. But she changed my day. She changed it with the smallest things. Adding tasks, tightening time, pushing me into closer proximity without ever acknowledging it. "Move the vendor call to 9, she said. "Yes, Miss Sterling. And reformat the contract summary. I want it in 2 pages. "Yes." She paused at her office door, hand on the handle, and added without turning around, "You'll be on my legal call at noon." I blinked. She never involved PAs in legal calls. Not directly. Not unless it was logistical. "Yes, Miss Sterling," I said, even though my stomach had already tightened. Her doors slid shut, and I sat down wondering if this was what it meant when Serafina Sterling liked someone. Not softness, pressure. At 11:58, the intercom chimed. "Miss Cohen," Serafina said. Inside, I entered with my notepad and tablet, posture perfect. Serafina was already seated at the head of a small conference table inside her office. Her private one, not the boardroom. A single folder lay in front of her. Thick, off-white. The kind of folder that didn't contain budgets or forecasts. The kind that contained endings. She didn't look at me when I sat at the far end. The call connected. A woman's voice came through. Calm, professional. "Miss Sterling," the attorney said. "We've received another refusal from Miss Sterling's counsel. She's still declining to sign the dissolution documents. She's requesting, again, an in-person conversation with you." Serafina's voice was quiet. No, just that. No irritation. No explanation. a refusal with the weight of law. Miss Sterling, the attorney continued carefully. It's been nearly a year. Courts will ask why. Serafina cut in, still calm. Because she doesn't want a divorce. That's not my problem. The attorney hesitated. She's indicating she may be willing to sign If I what? Serafina asked, voice smooth. The attorney cleared her throat. If you speak with her, one conversation. She's asking for closure. Serafina leaned back slightly in her chair. Her expression didn't change, but something in her eyes cooled further, like frost spreading. She had her closure, Serafina said. She wasted it. I wrote everything down like my hand wasn't shaking. The attorney tried again. Genevieve is insisting she still loves you. A pause. Serafina's response came like a blade being set on a table. Genevieve doesn't love me, she said. Genevieve loves possession. The room went still. Even the attorney's breathing seemed quieter. And then Serafina added, so controlled it sounded rehearsed. Next topic. The attorney pivoted immediately to assets. And scheduling. Serafina answered cleanly, efficiently, like she was discussing quarterly earnings instead of a marriage. But my mind wouldn't let go of that one sentence. She loves possession. What did that mean? What had happened between them that made Serafina sound so certain, so tired, so finished? The call ended at 12:23. Serafina stood. She didn't thank the attorney out loud. She didn't need to. She closed her laptop with a soft click and turned toward the window. Miss Cohen, she said. Yes, Miss Sterling. Your notes. I stood and brought my notepad to her desk, laying it down neatly. She skimmed it, eyes moving fast. Good, she said. Then, after a beat, do not repeat anything you heard. I understand, I said. Serafina's gaze lifted, finally, landing not on my eyes, but somewhere near my shoulder, as if direct eye contact would be indulgence. Genevieve is skilled, she said quietly. She knows how to use people's sympathy as leverage. Don't give her any. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't comfort. It was a warning, and it felt strangely intimate anyway. Yes, Miss Sterling, I whispered. She gave one small nod, and returned to her desk, as if the conversation was over. But the air felt different, heavier, as if something private had briefly cracked open, and then sealed itself again. It didn't take long for the universe to prove her warning necessary. At 2:40, security called up. Ms. Cohen, the guard said. Genevieve Sterling is here. She says Miss Sterling is expecting her. My stomach dropped. She is not, I said carefully. The guard hesitated. She's already in the elevator. Of course she was. Of course she didn't wait for permission. The private elevator chimed. Genevieve stepped out, like she'd walked straight out of a magazine. Elegant, controlled, expensive in a way that didn't glitter. Her eyes found me briefly, and there was no hostility there, just certainty. She didn't stop at my desk. She walked straight toward Serafina's office doors, like she had the right. I moved quickly, stepping ahead of her. Miss Sterling is unavailable, I said, voice calm. She has calls scheduled. Genevieve paused, looking at me with quiet patience, like I was a child explaining rules to an adult. She's avoiding me, Genevieve said softly. Still, I can take a message, I offered. Genevieve's gaze stayed on the frosted glass doors. She doesn't take messages from me. She takes what she wants, and lately, what she wants is distance. My throat tightened. Miss Sterling has asked that. Genevieve turned her head slightly, finally looking at me directly. You're the new one, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Genevieve's eyes were cool but not cruel. If anything, there was something almost resigned in them. She always hires competent women, Genevieve murmured, more to herself than to me. Women who look like they can handle her. Then she stepped past me. I reached for the intercom on my desk, fingers moving quickly. Miss Sterling, I said, keeping my voice low. Your wife is here. A pause. Then Serafina's voice came through, even and controlled. Do not let her in. My heart pounded. Understood. I stepped back in front of Genevieve before she could reach the doors. Ma'am, I said, gentle but firm. Miss Sterling is not receiving visitors. Genevieve stopped again, and for a moment she looked tired. Not defeated, just tired. She'll speak to lawyers, Genevieve said quietly. She'll speak to strangers. She'll speak to investors. Genevieve's voice softened. But she won't speak to me. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what I was allowed to say. So I said nothing. Genevieve's eyes moved over my face, studying me the way she'd studied the room on Monday, as if she could see what Serafina was collecting now. You know why she's divorcing me? Genevieve asked. My pulse spiked. I didn't answer. Genevieve smiled faintly. Not kind, not cruel, just honest. Because I loved her like she was a trophy, she said, not like she was a person. The words left a chill behind them. She walks into a room and everyone wants to own her, Genevieve continued softly. I thought marrying her meant I finally did. Genevieve's gaze sharpened. It didn't. I felt my throat tighten around a breath. Genevieve leaned slightly closer, not threatening, not intimate, just close enough for her voice to become private. If she ever looks at you, Genevieve said, she'll make you pay for it first. That's how she stays in control. Then she straightened. Tell her, Genevieve added, voice calm again, that I will sign when she stops punishing me with silence and gives me one conversation. She turned toward the elevator. I watched her go, my heart racing for reasons I didn't fully understand. Because she wasn't begging, she wasn't throwing a tantrum, she was stating terms, and the worst part was, some part of me believed she meant it. The elevator doors closed, the apex floor exhaled. I stood at my desk for a moment, then lifted the intercom again. Miss Sterling, I said, voice steady. She came by. She said she'll sign when you speak to her. One conversation. A pause, longer than usual. Then Serafina's voice came back. Lower. She's lying, she said. It wasn't anger, it was certainty. She wants access, Serafina continued. She wants a door. If I open it, she'll never close it again. I swallowed. Understood. Another pause. Then, almost imperceptibly, like a crack you only see if you're watching for it, Serafina added, good work keeping her out. My chest tightened at the praise. It was minimal, but it landed. And before I could respond, she ended it. That's all. The line clicked off. I set the intercom down, hands trembling faintly. Outside, I looked composed. Inside, I was unraveling. Because now I understood something I hadn't understood before. Serafina Sterling wasn't emotionally unavailable, because she didn't feel. She was emotionally unavailable because the last woman who had access to her tried to turn her into property. And if she liked me, if she was even capable of letting herself like me, she was going to fight it the way she fought everything. With control, with distance, with tests. And suddenly the slow burn wasn't just romantic, it was dangerous. Serafina Sterling didn't punish people the way ordinary bosses did. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't insult you, she didn't slam doors, she adjusted pressure. She made the air thinner, and watched to see if you still knew how to breathe. After the day I overheard Jade in her office, after the word she's your type, and the silence that followed, it was like Serafina decided my competence wasn't enough anymore. She wanted proof. She gave me extra work that didn't look like punishment on paper. A contract summary rewritten 3 different ways, each time with a different emphasis. Risk, value, exit strategy. A schedule rebuilt twice, not because anything changed, but because she wanted it tighter. A stack of documents delivered to her desk, at precise intervals, as if she was testing whether I could anticipate her thoughts before she had them. And through all of it, she barely looked at me. Not even when I did it perfectly. Not even when she had no reason to correct me. I told myself it was business. I told myself it was the cost of being her PA. But the truth pressed in, quiet and persistent. I didn't know if she was pushing me because she liked me, or because she wanted to crush whatever Jade claimed she'd seen. Because Jade had said it so casually, she's your type, as if that phrase meant something obvious, and it haunted me. What exactly does it mean to be Serafina Sterling's type? Was it beauty, quiet competence, discipline? Or was it just the kind of woman who looks good standing near her desk, useful and disposable? Somewhere in the middle of that spiral, I began to doubt everything. Maybe Jade was wrong. Maybe Serafina didn't like me at all. Maybe Serafina was simply doing what powerful women do when they sense someone getting attached, tightening the leash until the attachment breaks. I was still thinking that when Serafina's office doors slid open at 3:12 p.m. "Ms. Cohen," she said. I stood immediately. "Yes, Miss Sterling. We're leaving," she said. I blinked. "Leaving? Where?" "Briarstone," she replied. The name punched a clean, immediate hole through my confusion. Briarstone was the deal. The one I'd been quietly preparing for. Notes, comparables, risk summaries, because Serafina liked to look effortless in rooms where everyone else sweated. It wasn't supposed to be today. It wasn't on the schedule. It wasn't even close. I didn't see travel on, I started. It isn't, she said, cutting the sentence off without raising her voice. We have an hour. An hour. No briefing. No time for the careful distance I usually had when she traveled and I stayed behind. I watched her for half a second. How calm she was. How she didn't look rushed even when she'd just set my entire world on fire. And then I moved. Because panic was a luxury. And I had never been allowed luxuries around Serafina Sterling. I reached for her travel file. Yes, I had one ready. Because I'd booked her previous solo trips through that route enough times to know the pattern. I grabbed the contract folder, the encrypted drive with backups, her preferred pen, a charging kit, a slim binder of talking points I'd written in a voice I could never use out loud. As I moved, I felt it again, that strange thing that had been happening lately. Her attention, not warm, not soft, but present, like she was aware of every step I took, the way a hawk is aware of movement without having to turn its head. When I handed her the folder, she took it without touching my hand. Driver, she said. I'll have the car brought around, I replied. She gave a small nod and walked toward the elevator, coat already on, everything about her screaming control. And I followed, not because I wanted to, because my legs obeyed her the way my mind pretended it didn't. The city outside the car windows blurred past in grey streaks. The sky looked low, heavy, like it was thinking about snow. Serafina sat beside me in silence, phone to her ear for a moment, then off again, gaze fixed ahead as if she could stare the weather into submission. I stole one glance. She was beautiful in that quiet, lethal way that made you forget other people had faces. Hair pinned back perfectly. No wasted jewelry. No softness in her posture. The kind of woman who looked like she never had to ask for anything, because the world had already learned. And I, sitting beside her with a bag of documents and a heart that couldn't decide whether to be terrified or grateful, couldn't stop thinking about Jade's voice. She's your type. I tried to translate it into something harmless. Maybe it meant I dressed the way Serafina liked. Maybe it meant I didn't talk too much. Maybe it meant I knew when to disappear. Or maybe Jade was playing with me. Maybe Jade had said it just to see what Serafina would do. And maybe Serafina had responded by squeezing me harder, making my days heavier, my nights quieter, my thoughts louder. Because she didn't like weakness. And if she liked me, then I had become a weakness. The car pulled up to the private terminal. Everything moved fast after that. Security, boarding, the subtle hush that forms around wealth and power. No one looked at Serafina too long. No one spoke to her, unless spoken to. The world didn't flirt with her here. It obeyed. On the plane, she didn't ask if I was comfortable. She didn't offer conversation. She opened the contract file and read like it was an extension of her. I sat across from her, pretending the calm in my face matched the chaos in my chest. Because I kept noticing things. The way her finger paused at certain clauses. The way she exhaled slowly when she didn't like a number. The way she lifted her gaze once. Just once. To check if I was following. Not looking at me. Checking. As if I were a device she needed to work. Still, it did something to me. To be included. To be brought along. To be in the same air as her when she did business. It made my attachment feel less like foolishness and more like something that could become real. Which was exactly why it scared me. Briarstone was a gleaming, sterile building with a lobby that smelled like money and new paint. The meeting room was all glass and polished wood. The executives on the other side smiled too widely, spoke too politely, like they were praying Serafina Sterling would bless them. She didn't. She listened. She spoke. She cut. She offered terms like gifts that could be taken back. When she signed, it didn't feel like paper being marked. It felt like something being claimed. The contract was done. The handshake happened. The photos were politely declined. Serafina didn't linger. And then we were back in the car. Back to the airport. Back to the part of the day I thought would be simple. It wasn't. The departure board was bleeding red. Delayed. Delayed. Cancelled. The terminal was loud now. Voices overlapping. Rolling suitcases. Crying kids. Frustrated sighs. The sharp tone of people who weren't used to being told no. I approached the airline counter while Serafina stood behind me. Silent. Her face giving nothing away. The agent's smile was strained. Weather system moved in quickly. Snow, ice, visibility. We're cancelling a number of flights. Let me see what I can do. Her fingers clacked over the keyboard. She frowned, typed again. I'm sorry, she said. Your flight has been cancelled. We can rebook you for tomorrow. Earliest flight. But, do it, I said. The agent nodded, printed a confirmation, handed it to me, like it was a consolation prize. I took it, thanked her, turned back to Serafina. Tomorrow morning, I said quietly. Serafina's gaze flicked once to the board, then back to me. Hotel, she said. One word. Another problem to solve. Yes, Miss Sterling. This was my terrain. This was what I did. I pulled out my phone and started calling the hotels I'd booked for Serafina on her previous solo trips through this city, the ones near the airport, the ones with quiet floors and executive check-in. Full. 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 Every call ended in apology and weather. My battery dropped. My patience tightened. I looked out through the airport glass. Snow had started, thin at first, then thicker, swirling like it had been waiting for permission to fall. I turned to Serafina again. Everything within 10 miles is booked, I said. Because of the cancellations, we can try walking into a hotel. Sometimes they hold rooms, or go, she said. So we went. We followed signs to the airport shuttle area. The wind hit us like punishment. The cold was sharp, immediate, stealing breath. Serafina walked through it, like it didn't exist. I tried to match her pace, tried not to think about the way my cheeks burned, the way my hands ached, the way she didn't flinch. The shuttle arrived. We climbed in with other stranded travelers. The windows fogged. The air smelled like damp coats and exhaustion. Serafina sat beside the window, her profile cut cleanly by the dim light. She looked like she belonged somewhere warmer than this, somewhere nothing could inconvenience her. And yet she was here, with me. 5 minutes later, we arrived at the hotel. The lobby was packed, people clustered around luggage, talking over each other, pleading with staff. The front desk line was long. The staff looked overwhelmed. I glanced at Serafina. I'll handle it. She didn't nod. She didn't thank me. She simply let me go. Which in her language was permission. I stood in line, watching the front desk refuse people again and again. No availability. Nothing left. I'm sorry. When it was my turn, I leaned in slightly, voice calm. Hi, I said. We need 2 rooms, if possible. The receptionist looked tired. We're fully booked. My stomach dropped, but I held my smile. Not even a cancellation? She began to shake her head, and then her eyes flicked to her screen. Fingers tapped. A pause. Oh, she said, surprised. Someone just cancelled. My pulse jumped, but I didn't speak too fast. I didn't grab. I turned slightly towards Serafina. Miss Sterling, I said quietly. They have 1 cancellation. Serafina stepped closer, silent, decisive. The receptionist straightened automatically. 1 room. The receptionist added quickly, as if anticipating the problem. And it's a king suite. 1 room. My throat tightened. I kept my voice low. It's 1 bed, I clarified to Serafina, because that was what mattered. Serafina didn't react. She didn't blink too fast. She simply looked at the receptionist. Is there anything else available? The receptionist's fingers flew across the keys, searching again like her life depended on it. I'm sorry, she said. That's the last room. Everything else is gone. I turned fully to Serafina now, heart pounding. I can stay in the lobby, I offered quickly, or I can go back to the airport. There are seats. And Serafina looked at me then, not with softness, with a calm that made my suggestions feel childish. She didn't say my name. She didn't have to. She turned back to the receptionist. We'll take it, she said. The receptionist nodded, visibly relieved. Name, Sterling. The receptionist typed, then slid the tablet toward me to sign. I hesitated, then signed as her assistant. My hand didn't shake on the screen, but it shook inside my sleeve. The receptionist handed over the key cards. 11th floor. Serafina took 1 card, without looking at it, like the details were beneath her. And only after we had the key, only after the decision was irreversible, did my brain finally accept the reality. 1 room, 1 bed, a storm outside that was getting worse, and Serafina Sterling, who didn't do closeness unless she controlled it. I followed her toward the elevator, my voice quiet and careful. I really can go back to the airport, I said again. It's okay, I don't mind. Serafina didn't respond with words. She stepped into the elevator. Then she looked at me, expression neutral, eyes steady. A simple, silent question. Are you coming, or are you going to keep pretending there's another option? My breath caught. I stepped into the elevator. The doors slid shut, trapping us in a mirrored box with soft lighting and the sound of our breathing. The ride to the 11th floor was too quiet, not awkward, charged. I stood with my hands folded in front of me like a student. Serafina stood beside me like she owned gravity. When the doors opened, the hallway was dim and still, the carpet thick enough to swallow footsteps. Snowlight seeped faintly through small windows at the corridor's end. We reached the room. Serafina swiped the key with smooth efficiency. The lock clicked. The door opened. And there it was. The suite was beautiful in a muted way. Soft lamps, a sitting area, a small table. And the bed, one bed, huge, perfectly made, unapologetic. My eyes snapped to the sofa, and my heart sank. It wasn't a real sofa. It was a love seat. Sleek, modern, too short, the kind of thing designed for couples who planned to end up in the bed anyway. I set my bag down beside it anyway, because denial is a strange comfort. I'll take the sofa, I said quickly. Serafina didn't answer right away. She walked into the room, set her coat down, removed her watch with the same precise calm she used when she signed million-dollar deals. Then she turned back toward me. Her gaze flicked to the love seat, one measured glance, then returned to my face. Outside, snow tapped at the window, steady and insistent. Serafina spoke softly, voice even. We're not leaving, she said. Not you're not leaving. Not, I don't want you to leave. Just a statement of fact, as final as any contract. My throat tightened. I nodded. Because what else could I do? Because the storm wasn't asking permission. Because the world had closed around us. And because Serafina Sterling, cold, controlled, complicated Serafina Sterling, had just brought me into her orbit with nowhere left to hide. I told myself the love seat would do. I said it like it was a normal sentence. Like I hadn't just walked into a suite, with one bed and a storm sealing every exit. I'll take the sofa, I'd said, too quickly, too brightly, as if speed could turn discomfort into professionalism. Serafina didn't answer right away. She'd only looked, one measured glance at the love seat, then back to my face, like she was watching me volunteer for something I didn't understand. Outside, snow tapped against the window, steady and insistent, and then she said it, softly, voice even. We're not leaving. I didn't fully understand what she meant at first. My mind went to logistics, to solutions, to the way assistants are trained to produce options even when there are none. But then it clicked. She wasn't talking about the hotel. She was talking about me. About my instinct to make myself smaller, colder, farther away, just to keep the lines clean. About the way I kept offering the airport, the lobby, anything that would allow distance to remain intact. Serafina was ending that discussion without emotion, not because she was being kind, because she was being decisive. The storm wasn't asking permission. The roads wouldn't get safer because I wanted them to. And Serafina Sterling wasn't going to let her PA sleep on an airport chair out of some misguided devotion to professionalism. So I nodded, throat tight. Yes, Miss Sterling. And because I didn't know what else to do with that kind of finality, I did what I always did. I became useful. I unpacked my things with unnecessary precision. Charger, toothbrush, laptop, lining them up like small, orderly soldiers. If I could control the placement of objects, maybe I could control my thoughts. Serafina moved through the suite with quiet, exact movements. Coat placed neatly. Watch removed and set down like a ritual. Phone plugged in. No wasted motion. She wasn't grateful to have a room. She was simply tolerating the inconvenience with elegance. The snow thickened at the window, turning the city lights outside into soft, blurred halos. I cleared my throat. Chose the safest subject I could think of. Did you eat today? I asked. A pause. Just a fraction of one. No, she said. Of course. I can order room service, I offered, already reaching for the phone because the act of doing something felt safer than standing still under her gaze. Serafina's eyes flicked to me. Cool. Measuring. Then. Order. One word. Permission. I called downstairs, asked for something warm, soup, and something simple for Serafina, based on the preferences I'd collected in silence over weeks. When I hung up, I realized my hands were steady. My heart wasn't. While we waited, I sat at the small table with my laptop open, not because work demanded it, but because my mind needed an excuse to stay occupied. Serafina stood by the window, looking out at the snowfall like it was a problem that offended her principles. She wasn't on a call. She wasn't sending emails. She was just still. And that was the most unsettling thing of all, because it made her feel real. Room service arrived a few minutes later. I rolled the cart in and closed the door behind the attendant. The scent of tomato bisque filled the suite. Warm, rich, grounding. We ate at the small table. No office, no glass, no titles hovering between us like armor. Just quiet cutlery, steam from the soup, and the soft rhythm of snow against the window. It should have been awkward. It wasn't. It felt intimate in a way I didn't have language for, because Serafina wasn't performing. She wasn't being watched. She didn't have to be perfect for anyone but herself. Halfway through, I caught myself watching her hands. Hands that signed contracts. Hands that pulled rooms into order without raising their voice. Hands that never trembled. I looked down quickly, annoyed at myself. Serafina set her fork down with quiet precision and glanced at her phone. Her expression didn't change, but something in the air tightened. Subtle, familiar. I spoke carefully. Is everything all right? She lifted her gaze. I'm always all right. Not arrogance. Practice. I nodded, letting it go, even though my mind wanted to reach for the name we weren't saying out loud. Genevieve. After a beat, Serafina added, quiet, almost clinical. Genevieve called again today. My breath caught, not because she told me, because she didn't have to. I took the message. I said softly, like you instructed. I know, she replied, and that was it. The brief opening sealed shut again, but it was enough to leave me with the awareness that her marriage wasn't a story in the background. It was a weight she carried with perfect posture. After dinner, the quiet returned. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that makes you aware of every small sound. Silverware settling. The heater humming. The snow brushing the window like it wanted in. I cleared the cart and washed the used spoons in the sink. Not because the hotel needed me to, but because my hands needed something to do. Then I realized something that made my stomach tighten. There was one bathroom. One shower. I turned slowly. Serafina had loosened her collar. Just slightly. The smallest break in her usual perfection. She stood near the bed, phone in hand, face unreadable. Ms. Sterling. I began, then stopped because I suddenly didn't know how to say who showers first, without making it sound like something else. Her eyes lifted. Yes? I forced my voice to stay professional. The bathroom. Would you like to go first? A pause. Serafina looked at the bathroom door, then back to me. Go. She said. 2 letters, 1 command. I nodded too quickly. Yes. I grabbed my toiletry bag like it could protect me and walked into the bathroom, closing the door behind me with more care than necessary. And then I leaned both hands on the counter and exhaled. The mirror reflected my own face back at me, composed on the outside, not nearly as composed underneath. Because the truth was simple and humiliating. I didn't want to shower first. I wanted her to. Not because I was trying to be polite. Because the thought of her in the steam, hair down, skin warm, her guard loosened by something as ordinary as water, was the kind of thought that made my pulse misbehave. I turned the faucet on, letting the water run until it warmed. The sound filled the small room, steady and private. When I stepped into the shower, heat wrapped around me immediately. Steam rose, softening the sharp edges of the night. I tried to wash quickly, but my mind wouldn't cooperate. I kept hearing her voice. Go. Kept remembering how she said it, like she had the right to decide where my body belonged at any moment. By the time I shut the water off, my skin was warm and my thoughts were worse. I dried off, dressed in my simplest sleep clothes, and brushed my hair back with careful hands. Then I stood for a second at the door, palm resting on the handle. Opening that door meant stepping back into the suite, back into the quiet, back into Serafina's presence, back into the problem we were both pretending wasn't a problem. I opened it anyway. Serafina looked up as I walked out. For a heartbeat, Her gaze swept over me. Subtle, controlled, quick. Not desire, not hunger, assessment. And yet it still made my stomach flip, because being assessed by Serafina Sterling felt like being touched without contact. "Thank you," I murmured, stepping aside. "It's free." Serafina nodded once and walked past me into the bathroom. When she closed the door, the suite fell silent again, until the shower turned on. The sound of water filled the air, and suddenly I couldn't focus on anything else. Not my laptop, not the snow, not the love seat, just the fact that Serafina was behind that door, and the steam was taking her apart in ways the boardroom never could. I sat on the edge of the love seat and stared at the carpet, forcing my thoughts into safer lanes. But the shower kept running, and I kept imagining her, hair wet, lashes darkened, shoulders bare. All that cold composure washed down the drain for a few minutes. It was a cruel kind of intimacy. The kind that happens when you're close enough to hear someone breathe, but not close enough to touch. When the water finally stopped, my heart jumped like I'd been caught thinking too loudly. The bathroom door opened. Serafina stepped out in the hotel robe, white, soft, tied neatly at her waist. Her hair was damp, combed back. Her skin looked warmer under the dim light, as if the shower had briefly melted the ice she wore so well. And for one moment, just one, she looked less like a CEO, and more like a woman alone in a hotel room during a storm. Her eyes met mine. I looked away too fast, as if eye contact would expose everything. Serafina didn't comment. She walked to the bed, set her phone down, and folded her clothes with quiet precision. But the air had changed, like the steam had followed her out, like the room itself now held the shape of her warmth. And that was when I understood, with a sudden aching clarity. This night wasn't dangerous because we were in one room. It was dangerous because Serafina Sterling, fresh from a shower, hair damp, robe tied, was the most human I'd ever seen her. And my heart didn't know how to survive her being human. Then the night returned to its final problem, sleep. I moved back to the love seat with stubborn optimism, smoothing the blanket over it again as if I could negotiate with furniture. "I'm fine here," I said. I wasn't trying to be dramatic, I was trying to be professional. Because if I admitted the truth, that this love seat was a joke, that my spine already ached, that my nerves were too awake, I would also have to admit the other truth. I wanted the bed. Not because I was careless, because it was warm, because it was comfortable, because she was there. Serafina dimmed the lights. The room softened into shadows. I lay down on the love seat. Within minutes, I knew I wouldn't sleep. My feet hung off the edge. The cushion pressed wrong into my back. Every shift sounded loud in the quiet. And behind me, I could hear the bed, soft fabric moving, the faint change in air, as Serafina turned slightly. My heartbeat was too loud. My thoughts were worse. I kept my eyes shut anyway, pretending stubbornness could substitute for rest. Time passed. Then Serafina's voice came from the darkness, calm and low. "You won't sleep there. I'm fine." I lied automatically. A pause. Then she said my name. Not Ms. Cohen, not assistant, just Leah. The sound of it was a quiet shock, not romantic, not playful, intimate by default. "Yes, Miss Sterling," I whispered, because I didn't know what else to call her when she'd called me Leah. "Come to bed," she said. 2 words, not soft, not tender, a decision. My whole body went hot. I sat up slowly, blanket slipping from my shoulders, my mind racing through rules and consequences and fear. But the storm outside had already decided for us, and Serafina Sterling didn't repeat herself when she meant something. I stood and crossed the room carefully, as if every step carried me out of my role and into something unnamed. When I reached the bed, I hesitated, unsure where to look, unsure what to do with my hands. Serafina lifted the blanket slightly, just enough, not an invitation dressed in romance. A boundary shifted, a solution offered, a line redrawn. I climbed in, careful to leave space between us. The mattress dipped. Warmth wrapped around me. My pulse went wild. I stared at the ceiling, trying to make my breathing sound normal. Serafina lay beside me, still and composed even in the dark. Then she said quietly, "Sleep." And I realized something that made my chest ache. Serafina Sterling didn't make things easy for the people she liked. But tonight, just tonight, she'd stopped making it impossible. The snow didn't stop overnight. It got worse. Morning arrived in a washed-out bone-colored light that made the whole city look like it had been drawn in pencil. The airport screens kept blinking the same cruel words in red. cancelled, delayed, cancelled. And by mid-afternoon of the second day, Serafina and I both stopped checking them with any real hope. Cancelled, delayed, cancelled. And by mid-afternoon of the second day, Serafina and I both stopped checking them with any real hope. We'd fallen into a strange kind of rhythm inside the hotel suite, me at the small table, laptop open, rebooking, rescheduling, drafting careful emails that said due to weather as if weather were a polite excuse and not a force that could trap two people in one room for days. Serafina stayed near the window most of the time, phone in her hand, gaze fixed on the street below where snow kept piling against parked cars and street lamps. She didn't complain, she didn't pace, she didn't sigh, but I'd learned to read her silences the way other people read expressions. And something about the way she kept looking out that window, jaw set, just watching the storm. It was like she was connected to someone invisible through that black screen, waiting for the world to behave again. It was around 4:30 when I first noticed something was wrong. Not all at once. The suite had been comfortably warm all day, quiet, insulated, expensive in the way hotels are when they don't want you to remember you're trapped. Then, somewhere between one email and the next, I realized the air had changed. It didn't happen with a dramatic click or a sudden blast of cold. It was subtler than that, a slow thinning of warmth, like someone had opened a door I couldn't see. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. I'd been hunched over my laptop for hours, fingers cramped, neck tight. Of course the room would feel colder if I hadn't moved, but 10 minutes later, I reached for my coffee cup, and my fingertips came away almost numb. I glanced at the thermostat on the wall. The display had dimmed slightly, like it was losing power, and the temperature reading had dropped by 3 degrees in the last 15 minutes. Another 5 minutes passed, then another 2 degrees. By 5 o'clock, the warmth was gone in any real sense. The air had taken on that dry, sharp bite that makes your ears sting and your knuckles ache. I pulled my sweater tighter, shoved my hands into my sleeves, and kept typing anyway. Because stopping meant admitting I was cold, and admitting I was cold meant admitting I was affected by this whole impossible situation. Serafina was still by the window, still watching the snow fall like it had personally insulted her. Her posture was perfect, as always, shoulders squared, spine straight, one hand loose at her side. If she was cold, she didn't show it. Not in the way I did. Not in the way ordinary people did. But I'd learned another thing about Serafina Sterling. She didn't always show discomfort. She absorbed it. I tried to focus on my screen, but my fingers had started to stiffen. The keys felt harder under them. I flexed my hands under the table, out of sight, and kept going. Then Serafina spoke. Not loudly, not sharply, just, with that calm, inescapable certainty of hers. Her gaze was still on the window when she said Leah. I turned immediately. Yes, Miss Sterling? She didn't look away from the storm yet. For a second she just stood there, watching the street below where a snowplow struggled past in a slow, stubborn crawl. Then her gaze slid to me. Assessing. Precise. You're cold, she said. I opened my mouth to deny it automatically. Habit, pride, self-preservation. But my body betrayed me instead. A small shiver ran through me, quick and involuntary, traveling from my shoulders down through my arms. Serafina's eyes caught it. Of course they did. She didn't comment on it. She didn't soften. She simply gave a single nod, as if my body had confirmed what she'd already known. Leave the laptop, she said, her voice still directed at the window, as if the room itself were being instructed. Go to bed. I blinked at her. I can finish. Leah. Just my name. Not loud, not pleading. Final. I closed the laptop carefully, as if closing it slowly could me look less like I'd just been ordered into warmth. My fingers were clumsy now, stiff with cold, and I fumbled the latch once before it clicked shut. Yes, Miss Sterling, I said, and stood. My legs felt strange beneath me, half numb from sitting too long in the dropping temperature. I walked to the bed, pulled back the duvet, and climbed in fully clothed, because taking anything off felt like admitting how cold I really was. The sheets were still faintly warm from earlier in the day, but the air above them was sharp, and I burrowed deeper, tucking the duvet up to my chin. Even under the covers, I couldn't stop shivering. Not violently, not dramatically, just persistently. The kind of shivering that comes from deep cold, the kind that makes your jaw ache if you don't clench it. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind worry the window, trying to make my breathing sound normal. Behind me, I heard Serafina move. The soft tap of her phone being set down on the bedside table, the quiet click of the bathroom door opening. A moment later, water ran. Brief, efficient. Not a shower this time. Just enough to wash her hands maybe, or to reset the night in that controlled way she seemed to reset everything. I kept my eyes on the ceiling. I didn't look toward the bathroom door. I didn't look toward her phone on the bedside table. But then, bright in the dim room, the screen lit up. Jade. And beneath her name, the message preview glowed, unmistakable. If it's one room, where did Leah sleep? My heart gave a hard, humiliating kick against my ribs. I stared at it until the screen went dark again, as if staring could summon Serafina's reply, as if I could somehow will myself into that conversation and hear what Serafina would say when someone pressed into the one thing she refused to name. The bathroom door opened. Steam drifted out in a thin ribbon before dissipating into the cold air. Serafina stepped into the room in the hotel robe, white, perfectly tied, her hair pinned back as always. She looked composed, untouched by the cold, as if the thermostat failure had happened to everyone else. She walked to the bed, picked up her phone, and her thumb moved across the screen with smooth, quiet efficiency. She was typing a reply to Jade. I watched, my breath held. I wished, with a sudden aching desperation, that I could see what she wrote. Then she set the phone back down, face down, and climbed into the bed beside me. She didn't get under the covers right away. She lay on top of them, on her back, staring at the ceiling like she was trying to organize the silence. The mattress dipped under her weight. I could feel the faint warmth of her body even with space between us. The room was quiet except for my own shivering. I tried to stop it. I clenched my muscles, slowed my breathing, willed myself to be still. But the cold had a mind of its own. Serafina was silent for a long time. Then, without turning her head, she spoke, her voice low. You're still shivering. I'm fine, I lied automatically, my teeth chattering faintly on the word. Serafina didn't respond. The silence that followed felt different. It wasn't empty. It was active. I could feel her thinking, weighing something, like she was standing at the edge of a decision and deciding if it was worth the risk. Then she turned her head on the pillow, just enough to look at me. Her eyes were dark in the dim light, her expression unreadable. Come here, she said. The words were so quiet, so direct, my breath caught in my throat. Miss Sterling, I started, because my brain was still trying to follow the rules of a world that no longer existed. Leah, she said. And my name in her mouth was a quiet command that broke my resistance. I watched as she sat up, not fully, just propping herself on one elbow. The movement was slow, deliberate. She looked at me, at the way I was curled into a tight ball, still wearing my jacket. Take off your jacket, she said, her voice still low. My heart hammered. My fingers, clumsy with cold, went to the zipper. Unzipping it felt like an act of surrender. My mind went to all the places I'd been trying to keep it away from. Her hands, her scent, her closeness. What this meant. As I shrugged the jacket off, I felt a new wave of cold hit my arms, making me flinch. I hesitated again. I don't, Serafina cut me off. But her voice wasn't impatient. It was calm, inescapable. It's just warmth, Leah. Don't overthink it. She saw it. She saw the panic in my head. She heard the thoughts I wasn't saying out loud, and instead of ignoring them, she named them, and dismissed them with a gentle authority that made my knees feel weak. She shifted again, pulling back the duvet on her side. Come to me, she said. This time, I didn't protest. I moved like I was wading through water, slowly, carefully, until I was close enough to feel the heat radiating from her skin. Serafina's arm came around me, firm, deliberate, drawing me in, until my shoulder was pressed against her chest. Warmth flooded into me so fast it almost hurt. The scent of her, clean, expensive, familiar, wrapped around me, chasing the last of the chill away. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, and my body, exhausted and grateful, relaxed into her before my pride could stop it. Serafina adjusted her hold once, pulling the duvet more securely around both of us. Her hand rested on my upper arm, her thumb stroking the soft cotton of my shirt once. A small, grounding gesture that was so subtle, I almost thought I imagined it. Better? She asked, her voice a low murmur near my ear. I could only nod, my face half hidden against her robe, which felt impossibly soft. She didn't say anything else. She didn't soothe me, or apologize or explain. She simply held me, like she was containing a problem she had decided to solve personally. And as I lay there, warm at last, my heart beating a frantic rhythm against her steady one, I couldn't stop one thought from rising, sweet and dangerous. She had answered Jade, and then she had turned to me and solved my cold with her own body. I didn't sleep the way I usually slept, not deeply, not freely. I slept the way you sleep when your body is afraid to admit it's safe, half aware, drifting in and out, catching on small sounds, the heater that never clicked back on, wind worrying the window, the quiet, steady rhythm of Serafina's breathing beside me. She didn't touch me again after that first grounding stroke of her thumb. She didn't have to. Her arms stayed around me, a warm, solid weight that was both a comfort and a terrifying kind of anchor. I was curled against her side, my head resting just below her shoulder, my face near the soft fabric of her robe. It was the most intimate I had ever been with anyone without a single word of romance being spoken. At some point in the night, exhaustion finally won, because when I opened my eyes again, the room was different. The dark had softened. A pale winter light spilled through the curtains, turning everything a muted silver. The storm had quieted. For one stunned, sleepy second, I forgot where I was. I felt warm, safe, held. Then I remembered. One bed, one storm, one woman whose arm was still around me. My breath caught quietly. Sometime in the night, she had shifted onto her back, but her arm had remained, keeping me tucked close. My head now rested on her shoulder, my face turned toward her neck. I was closer than before. I could feel the soft terry cloth of the hotel robe against my cheek. I could smell her skin, not perfume, just the clean, warm scent of her. Her face was calm in the morning light. Her hair, which she always wore pinned back with such severe elegance, had softened overnight. A few dark strands had escaped, framing her temple. She looked peaceful, and that was more breathtaking than her power had ever been. I watched her for half a second too long, then looked away fast, as if she could feel being seen even in her sleep. My heart was already racing, because this was the morning after, and the morning after always came with rules I didn't know how to follow. I shifted carefully, trying to slip away without disturbing her, trying to put distance back between us before she woke up, and decided last night had been a mistake. But the moment I moved, her arm tightened, just slightly, an unconscious reflex, and then her eyes opened, just like that. No grubby blinking, no softness, no confusion. Awake, present, controlled, like she'd simply decided it was time to be awake. Her gaze landed on the ceiling first, then turned toward me. Her arm was still around me. We were still tucked together. A long second passed where the only sound was our breathing in the quiet room. Then Serafina's voice came, low and even, a little rough from sleep. "Did you sleep?" My throat tightened. "Yes, Miss Sterling." A pause. Her eyes, so close to mine now, were impossible to read. "You were quiet," she said. I didn't know what that meant, if it was an observation or a compliment. I tried not to move, I whispered, because it was the only honest thing I could think of. A tiny beat of silence, and then, so small I almost thought I imagined it, the corner of her mouth lifted, in a ghost of a smile. It was gone as quickly as it came. She sat up smoothly, her arm sliding away from me, and the loss of her warmth was immediate and sharp. The robe was still tied neatly at her waist, but the movement revealed a glimpse of her bare collarbone in the soft light, and it made my mouth go dry. She reached for her phone on the bedside table and checked it. Immediately, her attention sharpened. The softness of the morning evaporated. The CEO was back. She stood, posture perfect, and said, "We leave in 2 hours." My assistant brain snapped into place. "Yes, Miss Sterling. I'll arrange the car." Serafina nodded once and walked toward the bathroom. She stopped at the door as if remembering something. "Last night," she said without turning fully around. "That doesn't leave this room." It wasn't a threat. It was a boundary, a line she needed to draw because she could feel how close the night had brought us to something that would complicate her control. "I understand," I whispered. Serafina nodded once, satisfied, and closed the door. I sat up, pressing my palms lightly into the sheets, trying to breathe like a normal person. This was still my boss. Still Serafina Sterling. Still married. Still complicated. And yet, I could still feel the phantom weight of her arm around me. I stood and began packing quietly. I had slept in my clothes, the simple leggings and cotton shirt I'd worn under my jacket. Getting ready was simple. I smoothed down the fabric, feeling the unslept-in stiffness. It was a stark reminder that this wasn't my life. I was a guest in a story that wasn't mine. When the shower stopped, I forced myself to look away, focusing on my phone. I ordered coffee for pickup in the lobby. I confirmed our rebooked flight. I checked the weather. The snow had stopped. But the airport was a mess of delays. Then the bathroom door opened. Serafina stepped out, hair damp again, dressed already in the same impeccable clothes from the day before. Black trousers, a fitted sweater, her coat draped over one arm. Efficient. Perfect. Like the night hadn't happened. Like the bed hadn't been shared. She didn't look at the sheets. She didn't look at me. She picked up her phone and said, "Room key." I handed it to her instantly. She took it, then turned away. In the hotel lobby, the world returned. People, noise, movement, the smell of coffee, the clatter of luggage wheels, the hum of weather reports on the TV behind the reception desk. Our driver arrived and took our bags. As we walked toward the doors, my phone buzzed. A notification from Serafina's calendar. Legal, 10 a.m. Rescheduled. Then another buzz, an incoming call. Genevieve. My stomach dropped. I didn't answer immediately. I looked at Serafina, unsure whether to tell her first or follow the instructions she'd already given me. Serafina noticed the screen. Her gaze flicked to the name, then to my face. "Don't," she said. One word. I declined the call. A second later, a message came through. "Genevieve, your little trip with Jade is over. I'm done waiting. We're talking the second you land. Don't even think about ignoring me." My fingers went cold. Genevieve didn't suspect me. She didn't even see me. To her, the only person Serafina would ever hide away with was Jade. I was an invisible complication, a secret no one was even looking for. Serafina didn't ask what it said. She didn't need to. She held out her hand. "Phone," she said. I hesitated, then placed it in her palm. Serafina read the message, expression unchanged. She didn't look angry or cornered. She just looked, tired of it. Then she handed the phone back like it was nothing. Her voice was quiet, almost flat. "When we land, I'll handle it." It wasn't a promise to me. It was a decision for herself. My throat tightened. "Yes, Miss Sterling." We stepped into the cold morning air, breath turning visible immediately. Snow crunched underfoot. The city looked scrubbed clean, innocent. But inside me everything was messy. Because Genevieve was watching Jade. Serafina was watching me. And I was watching Serafina, falling for a woman who would call sharing a bed with me. A secret that couldn't leave the room. In the car, Serafina stared out the window. Jaw set in that quiet way that meant she was already planning her next move. I watched her reflection faintly in the glass and felt a thought rise, sweet and terrifying. If she was willing to share a bed with me during a storm, what would she be willing to do when the storm followed us home? The flight back was professional, polished, perfect. We sat in first class, separated by an armrest and an ocean of things we weren't saying. Serafina worked, tablet in hand, emails answered with brutal efficiency. Her posture so controlled she could have been carved from marble. I sat beside her pretending to review documents, but my body remembered everything my mind was trying to forget. The weight of her arm around me, the warmth of her breath near my hair, the way she'd said my name in the dark, Leah, like it meant something she wasn't allowed to keep. When we landed, the driver was waiting. The city stretched grey and indifferent around us. Snow still clung to the edges of buildings, stubborn and slow to melt. Serafina sat across from me in the car, not beside me. The distance felt deliberate. She made one phone call during the ride, clipped, professional, solving a problem in 3 sentences. When she hung up, she stared out the window, her expression unreadable. I wanted to say something. Did that night mean anything to you? Are we going to pretend it didn't happen? But the words stayed locked in my throat. Sterling Tower rose before us like a monument. We took the private elevator to the apex floor in silence. When the doors opened, I expected something. A glance, a pause, anything that said we shared something. And it mattered. Serafina stepped off the elevator, her heels clicking once against the polished concrete. She walked straight to her office without a word. The frosted glass doors slid shut, and I stood there, alone, feeling like I'd been erased.